Greetings, everyone. The title of my talk today is My Mother's Encounter with God. And of course, today we are celebrating Mother's Day, and it's such a great day for all of us. How many of you here are mothers? How many are mothers? Or you had a mother?
No.
How many? That should be all of us. Yes, that should be all of us. So we can all celebrate together. This week I was reading Proverbs 31, which presents the ideal woman, the ideal wife and mother. And I encourage all of you to read that chapter this week. It's a wonderful chapter. There were 3 points that I took from it especially. It's all good, but 3 points. The ideal wife and mother is, her worth is far above rubies. And so I think what that's saying is she's just worth a whole lot. I don't know how much rubies are worth, but I'm thinking that's really a lot. And then her children rise up and call her blessed. Now, if a woman can get all of her kids to rise up and call her blessed, I think that's pretty special too. I think that's really great. And then she is a woman who fears the Lord, and therefore she shall be praised. So I think I love that Proverbs 31. I'm going to do something very different today. You all know that I'm a storyteller. But today, in honor of all the mothers here, I'm going to share my own mother's story in her own words from interviews that I did with her. My mother is the best example I know of a Proverbs 31 woman, a woman who struggled for most of her life and came through faithful and committed both to her Lord and to her marriage. And because of her faithfulness, she has a husband in heaven and 3 children following Jesus. She also had a near-death experience that changed her life forever. And she will share that with you too in her own words. First, let me give you a little background information about my mother. Her name is Millie Gift Smith. She was born in 1920 in Jackson, Michigan. From a young age, she was a talented artist. When she was 21, she married my father, Alden Gift, also known as Gifty by his friends, and he was from Indiana. He was a jazz musician who sang and played saxophone and clarinet, and he toured the country with various big bands during the late 30s and the early 40s. And through most of their 57-year marriage, I have to say, my parents led separate lives. My dad had his musician friends. My mother had her church friends. My father didn't come to know the Lord until his dying days. We prayed for him, we children especially, I'm speaking of now, we prayed for him for over 40 years. And finally, our prayers were answered. And in another message, maybe I will share with you my father's story, which is also, I think, very, very interesting. But as I said, this story is my mother's in her own words. I met Gifty in a Walgreens drugstore in Jackson, Michigan when I was 19. A musician from Indiana, he played saxophone and clarinet in a traveling jazz band. We started dating the next year. I was really impressed with him. Other guys ordered alcohol, but he drank sodas with me. He was handsome and charming and very talented. I fell deeply in love with him. As a Christian, I struggled with my decision to marry him. Because he played in nightclubs, I didn't feel right about marrying him in my conservative church. So we got married in another church where no one knew me. We traveled with the band for a year, one of the happiest years of my life. We were young and in love, and it seemed anything was possible. Then I became pregnant. I moved in with my parents while Gifty spent 9 months in the Army. After receiving a medical discharge, he moved in with my parents also. It was a house brimming with many relatives and a lot of commotion. Hard to take for Gifty, who had grown up an only child in a mostly silent house. When I became pregnant again, he was even more unhappy. He moved out and started going with the girl singer in the band. We were on the verge of divorce. He finally came back with the understanding that I would change my ways and be more tolerant of his ways. Not once did he apologize for his own behavior. We moved to California for a year while he traveled again with the band. Then we bought a house back in Jackson, the only house we ever owned. We were happy there at first. I had our third child, Susan, a darling baby girl, but now our tiny house seemed smaller than ever. Gifty worked as a salesman in a men's clothing store and played with local bands on the weekend. When he came home from work, he would have a beer, just one. We got close to some of the band members and had parties and jam sessions in our home. For a while, I tried doing things his way. Everyone was drinking, even me. I started smoking too, thinking it would please Gifty. It didn't. I felt lost. Even when I prayed, I felt God wouldn't answer my prayers. My 2 older children, Carole and Steve, started spending weekends with my parents. My mother took them to a nearby church, and they were happy there. They were learning to know Jesus and love him. I started going too, catching a ride with a friend who lived near us. I knew God was working in our lives. Soon I was right with the Lord, going to church and happy again. But this created a problem in my marriage. Even though we remained under the same roof, my husband and I began living separate lives. Gifty joined the neighborhood guys in their drinking sessions in the backyard every night. Soon he was drinking a lot. He would work and drink, work and drink. I'm an artist, so I started filling my lonely hours with painting. Meanwhile, he started playing golf and going out to the bars. I once asked him if he wanted to leave, and he said, no, he didn't want to leave. I prayed for him every day and night. He was drinking more and saying things that made me cry. I threw myself into my painting and joined an art club. Gifty usually stopped at a bar on his way home from work. Every night I prayed God would keep him safe as I waited for him to come home. Many nights I never knew when that would be. It was a lonely life. Every time I tried talking to Gifty about my feelings or our family or anything else, he would shrug and say, I don't know, or I don't care. I could never get a real answer from him. I just kept praying and believing that God would save him. Over the years, I was sick a lot and had to have several operations. But I kept busy with my art, thankful that God had given me such a passion for creating beautiful work for him. I know that painting helped ease the hurt of being alone. Once I went to my pastor for his advice. He told me, if your husband won't talk to you, write him a letter and tell him all your feelings. So I wrote him and told him how worried I was about his drinking and how much I loved him and wanted us to be closer. And I said so much more. I know he read the letter, but he never admitted it. For decades, I went to church without him, just the children and me. He wouldn't go. Often I watched Billy Graham crusades on television. I knew Gifty was listening while pretending to be asleep. I sensed he liked Billy Graham. I never gave up praying and faithfully believing that God would answer my prayer. I did this for 57 years. One day when Gifty was seriously ill, suffering the effects of too many years of drinking and smoking, I told him that he should ask Jesus into his heart. He shocked me by saying, "I already did, some time ago." He had never told me. Even then, he would not talk to me about it. But while he was in the hospital, my pastor visited with him often and prayed with him many times. He assured me of Gifty's salvation. During the last days of his life, as my husband faced heart surgery, he told me he was sorry for the way he had treated me. I broke down and sobbed. It was the first time in 57 years of marriage that he had ever said he was sorry. After he died, I found my letter among his personal things. He had kept it. I'm convinced that because I loved him and stayed with him all those years, he is now in heaven with Jesus. I am 97 years old and happy. I prayed with faith, believing, and Jesus was faithful. I often wonder, if I had left my husband all those years ago, where would he be now? Several years after my father died, my mother, at the age of 85, ran off to Las Vegas and married the man of her dreams, John Smith, a dashing multimillionaire businessman, also 85. I told her, "It's all right, Mom, as long as you don't get married by an Elvis impersonator." That's where I draw the line. Now, actually, she came to Vegas to get married so the West Coast family could be there for the wedding. She didn't exactly run off. Actually, John and my mother had known each other most of their lives. They attended the same church, and they comforted each other after their mates died. And eventually, they fell madly, passionately in love. Gals, the message there is that it's never too late. Never. John and my mother had 9 happy years together until he died of Alzheimer's disease at 94. After his death, she moved back to our childhood home in Jackson to live with my sister and her husband, who had moved previously back to our childhood home. Over the years, my mother developed a very successful career as an artist and teacher. Her paintings grace the walls of many hospitals, offices, and homes. She won countless awards. If you Google Millie Gift Smith, you will find hundreds of instructional videos that she filmed of herself painting and explaining how to do it. Often she would paint in the morning, edit her video in the afternoon, something I still can't figure out how to do, and she would post it on YouTube that evening. And in every video, she witnessed about the Lord. She has hundreds and maybe even thousands of followers from around the world. She also has hundreds of paintings for sale on eBay. My sister manages her online store these days and sells several paintings every month. In fact, you can see some of my mother's paintings in the hall by our apartment on the 4th floor. I've got several of her paintings hanging there. I could write a book about all the wonderful things my mother was to me, and it still wouldn't be enough to communicate fully the amazing, talented, beautiful, loving, godly woman that she was. Truly a Proverbs 31 woman. So today I want to focus on an experience she had that she would eagerly share with you if she were here. In the summer of 2016, when she was 96 years old, she was about to do a painting of Christ. She was in the bathroom getting water for her watercolors when she suddenly fell backward and hit the back of her head hard. 2 months later, a CAT scan revealed the bleeding on her brain, a hematoma that would require surgery. And at first, some of the surgeons said, oh no, she's too old, we're not gonna operate on her. But a visiting surgeon said, let me talk to her. And he talked to my mother, and he went back to the other doctors, and he said, this woman, she's amazing, we're doing the surgery. And he did the surgery. And he even told us later that he felt the hand of God guiding him while he was doing the surgery. During that surgery, my mother had a near-death experience, an incredible encounter with God. And so again, I'll tell her story, and these again are in her own words. I was on the operating table. The woman giving me the anesthetic was named Angel. I said, oh, you're an angel. And she smiled. They started procedures on me, and I thought that they would just put a needle in my arm and I'd go to sleep and forget everything. But she kept rubbing my hand and pouring stuff on my hand. It bothered me. I thought, what is she doing? I wish she'd quit doing that and let me go to sleep. As I thought that, all of a sudden I found myself in a deep, dark tunnel, almost like a dungeon. It was dark and deep and big. I said, where am I? I looked up and saw a huge doorway and a dim light beyond it. I could hardly see, but I could make out the image of a man, the beautiful, strong shape of a man. He was standing in the doorway. I couldn't see his face. He was just a shadow, and he seemed to be wearing a sport coat. I said to him, is that you, God? And he said, yes, and immediately disappeared. Then in the darkness, I felt somebody take my hand, and I felt a sense of overwhelming love and peace. I had never experienced such love before. I said, are you Jesus? And in the sweetest voice, he said, yes. Then he said, I've got a question to ask you. I said, what do you want to ask me? He said, my child, why do you want to go back to that earth with all the pain you've had? I thought a minute. I felt so good talking with Jesus. I didn't have any pain. It was wonderful. He said it again. My child, why do you want to go back down there to that awful place with people killing each other? And there's so much evil, and they don't love me. I still didn't know what to say. I looked up, and all of a sudden, I saw a cross on the wall. I saw him on the cross. I said, Jesus, you came down to this earth as a man, and you suffered and died for me. I want to go back and live for you. He told me, I will heal you quickly and give you the strength to do that painting of me. And I want your daughter Carole to write this story. He kept talking to me and encouraging me, and I was answering him, and I thought, oh, this is great. I asked him, why do people kill your beautiful little babies and turn against you? He said, because I made them with their own will to do as they choose. Then he said for the third time, my child, do you really want to do this? I said, yes. And the next thing I knew, I was lying in a hospital bed, hooked up to all kinds of tubes and in terrible pain. Suddenly, at the foot of my bed, I saw someone. He had the ugliest face I'd ever seen. He was laughing and pointing his finger at me. He said, "I'm the devil, and I knocked you down. I hurt your head." I said to him, "Get away from me, you old devil. Jesus is greater and stronger than you." And immediately he disappeared. My mother's experience with God changed her life. Hours after she awoke from surgery, she began telling people about her encounter with God. I had flown in that morning, and so I was there hours after she came out of recovery. And I was shocked by her alertness and her energy. I expected her, at 96 years old, having brain surgery, I expected her to look like death warmed over. I really did. Instead, she looked amazingly young and beautiful. And for the next 2 years, she told anyone who would listen about her encounter with God. She always started her conversation, even with strangers, with a question. "Do you love Jesus?" Whatever their answer, she would say, "You have no idea how much he loves you. He loves us beyond anything we can imagine, and he wants to do so much for us." Some people came back over and over again to hear her story. A priest even asked her to pray for him. She did. After her surgery, my mother regained her sense of taste, which she had lost several years before. God did heal her quickly, as he had promised. She painted her experience with Jesus and countless other paintings as well. 2 years later, during the last months of my mother's life, she must have sensed that time was short, because she seemed driven, obsessed with finishing the work God had called her to do. Almost every day, she videotaped herself doing a new painting and posted it on YouTube. On every video, she shared her faith and urged people to experience Christ's love for themselves. If she were here today, I think this would be her message to all of you. Bad things happen to all of us. We don't know why. But regardless of what happens to us, God is greater, and he will surround us with his love and with his peace if we trust in him. He loves us with a vast, limitless love, and it's ours for the taking. When my mother passed away in October of 2018 at the age of 98 and a half, my sister Susan and I were sitting beside her bed, each of us holding her hand. Her last glimpse was of something I couldn't see. She looked up past me with a startling intensity in her eye. I could only imagine what she saw. I think it was Jesus beckoning her and saying to her, "Come on home, my child, this time to stay." Let's pray. Thank you.